So this is the default application that we've installed using the ng new, and then we run it with ng serve. We can open it up with our favorite IDE by browsing there. Let's see, it's under Januzzi, under webdev. And under webdev, let's see, we have it here. There's our Angular application. We'll open it up. And in here, we have a couple of things. Right? Most of our work is going to be done inside of our source directory. Under the source directory, we have an index page. Right? This index page is the entry point of our application. Right? If we open it up, we'll notice that it's mostly empty. Right? And we'll see that there's not much there. So again, the same questions, right? That in the React application, where is all of my content? You know, we see that there's a lot of content, right? There's links, there's images, there's all sorts of stuff, but my index page is almost empty, right? And you know, very much like in our React application, all the content is mostly dynamically injected into this index page. Okay, just like a React application, we have a root elements, right, where all the content is being added. In our case, for Angular, that root is this app root. Right? This app root is notice that it's not an HTML element. Right? It looks like it's a custom-built component, right? That has been already pre-configured for us that we can navigate in there. Right? It's implemented using this TypeScript file. Right? The TypeScript files that we're going to be looking at are going to be the equivalent of our JavaScript components that we have been building in React. Okay, it's a same thing. We export classes. We have the names of those classes. We have imports, right, of our libraries that we need to import into our classes. There's a little bit of difference, in philosophy, in that in React what we'll try to do is that it will try to mix and match both JavaScript and HTML in the same file, right? In the same JavaScript files, right? And we can do this using JSX. You know, JSX allows us to, you know, write a lot of JavaScript, and then using curly brackets allows you to intermix HTML and JavaScript. You know, go back and forth between JavaScript and HTML and JavaScript and HTML by using these escape sequence characters, right, with these curly brackets. Yes, right. So you can say return, and you can start writing divs and h1s and, you know, ULs and whatnot, and then intermix JavaScript so you can iterate over an array, right, and generate dynamic content. So you know, React really pushes that idea, right, where you have both the HTML and the JavaScript intermixed into intermingling in the same file. Angular totally goes against that idea. It says, no, that's not a really good idea. Instead, the front end, right, the rendering of the content should live separately from the controlling or the logic part of your application, right? And it's very adamant about making this distinction. Okay, so in your TypeScript files, right, which is the equivalent of your JavaScript files in React, right, you will typically only ever find just plain old JavaScript. Well, actually TypeScript. Okay, and you will not see any HTML whatsoever in your TypeScript. Right? And Angular philosophy, you know, really pushes this idea that your HTML and your rendering logic and your layout and, you know, to look pretty and whatnot is instead separate in an HTML file, separate, which is related to this TypeScript, but it's a separate file. Okay, and the way they are connected to one another is by using this decorator. This decorator here, you know, it annotates my class as a component. Right? And it allows you to configure your component. One of the things that you can configure is what is the HTML file that is related to this one component. Right? So for instance, and we can point to it by saying, where is this HTML file found? If you navigate there, notice that this is where we can find the actual content, right? That those images, those links, right? The content that is being rendered here. Okay. Most of our content, we don't really care about this. we can just replace that with our own content and just say hello, from Angular. Right, and this will be dynamically re-rendered, right, recompiled, right, and reloaded in your browser. Okay, so back into the philosophy. So the philosophy is, again, you will never see HTML embedded here. Well, I should not say ever. You could, instead of using a template URL, you use a separate annotation here where you can embed actual content here. We can say h1, hello from embedded HTML content. Right, and if I go back, notice that it re-renders and it shows that content. Now, this would be fine if the content is trivial. It's something really, really quick that might fit in maybe a page or so. But other than that, right, anything other than trivial content, you would avoid, embedding actual content in here. Instead, you would point, right, to a separate file that contains that content. Make sense? Right? Again, Angular really, really pushes this idea, right, that these are separate, right, and part of the same coin, but two faces of the same coin, right? And the idea is that these two files, right, they really need two different types of skill sets, right? In the HTML side, typically you are somebody who's if you're on the HTML side, you're looking to make sure that you're laying it out correctly, that you're using white spaces, that you're using the correct color scheme. You're really putting a lot of effort into making the content look pretty, right? And that is a separate set of skill sets from here. When you're on the TypeScript side, you are writing the logic, right, of how the page should behave, right? Where to get the data, right? How to instantiate models, right? How to interact with the server, how to do all sorts of things that are logic based, yes? And they should not intermingle, right? The code should not intermingle. The communication between the two should be done through some state variables, right? So for instance, here my class is declaring a variable that says title. See that? And the communication between the HTML side and the TypeScript side is through these state variables. Right? So for instance, title from the HTML side, I could reference those variables, right, or that are declared on the TypeScript side by using escape sequences. Right? The escape sequences are double curly brackets, right? Oftentimes referred to as mustaches. And this allows you to then reference state variables that are declared in the parent component. So for instance, we can reference the variables that are declared. Notice that my IDE knows how Angular is plumbed, right? How they're connected to one another, and already knows that the component side is declaring that state variables, and I can reference it here. I can say title. And this re-renders, notice that indeed it renders as the content. Yes? And I can style it any which way I want, H2. And I can style it any which way I want. Make sense? Everybody good? All right.